Cool Hand Podcast, something you got to deal with. Welcome back to the show. I am your host. My name is Q. We have another song to review today and talk about, which is a very good song by a new artist, someone who we've never discussed on the show, and that person's name is Garrett Spencer.
Once upon a time, I felt so alive.
Before we get started, of course, I hope that you are in a position where you are relaxed and ready to listen to the Cool Hand Podcast. Maybe pour up some tea, some coffee. What I'm drinking on today is called kahlua. Now, we got this from some friends. My wife and I got this from a couple who made this, I believe, and this is my first time sipping on it. We got this in September. It's now December, and that shows you how much I really indulge in the alcoholic beverage. Very casual drinker. I do like to collect bottles, but this stuff is pretty good. I even put some cream in it, and it's like a coffee liqueur, if I'm saying that right. It's pretty good. I'm gonna take a sip for the people. And you only taste like a hint of alcohol. I don't know what the percentage is, the concentration of alcohol in here, but it's really good. You know, I diluted it some more with cream, but look into it. Anyway, Garrett Spencer, he dropped what I call the song of 2020, which is called Resilience. Why do I call it the song of 2020? Well, we're going to find out a little later. You're just going to have to be patient. But we have to take this thing by layers. We have to break this down. Who is this new person on the scene? Who is Garrett Spencer? Let's talk about it. Garrett Spencer is a new artist coming out of the North Central Ohio area. He is one half of the Unnamed podcast. That's called the Unnamed Podcast, and that's with Tater and G. I guess the G stands for Garrett. And now, let me tell y'all something. I make podcasts. I do it as a hobby. There's a whole story of how I began doing it, which we'll talk about, sometime in the future. But I don't listen to podcasts. It's not, I've listened to podcasts before, but I'm not a regular podcast listener. But I did get to check out the Unnamed Podcast with Tater and G. A while ago, they had an episode talking about The Office, and I thought that was fun because I'm a huge fan of The Office. I'm 27 years old. We grew up when The Office premiered, and we grew up on that show. So they had some Office trivia on the show, and I enjoyed that. And just yesterday, I got to catch up on one of their latest episodes, which had my bro Ty Cam on it, who we've discussed on the show a couple times and had him up here for an interview. And it was a good episode. Tater and G have good chemistry, very natural. Garrett, he is very natural, has a good radio voice, so to speak, and very enjoyable. And I got a lot of information from this episode that I listened to yesterday with Ty Cam. So check out the Unnamed Podcast if you get a chance. It's really good. You'll enjoy it. It's fun and very enjoyable. As I start to listen to podcasts more, I don't even listen to my own podcast, by the way. I don't care. I just don't care. I make it. It's fun. I have people on. They talk about themselves. I'm satisfied. They're satisfied. And hopefully the listener is satisfied and learns something new. But I think I'm going to try to indulge in the podcast listening field some more. So check out the Unnamed Podcast, but he makes one half of that duo as I continue. So he's a part of the Unnamed Podcast, and yeah, let me move on because I'm just going to start repeating myself. That's what I do. So there's not much I can say more on the background of Garrett Spencer, because he's a new artist. This is literally his first song. Now, why would I cover somebody's first song? Well, let me tell you something about myself. I just don't ask anyone to come up here. You know, this is something that I find fun for me. I don't just talk, I don't want to feel forced to talk about anything either. However, you would imagine like, well, you like to talk about music on here, you interview creatives. Why would you, you know, there's plenty of people who are experienced in music. There's plenty of people that you know who do music. Well, maybe I just don't want to talk about their music. Maybe their music isn't something that I find interesting. You get what I'm saying? So for someone to make their very first song, and I want to talk about it, I think it's cool. I don't know, but it can say something about me. It's like maybe I set the bar low, or it can say something about him that he set the bar high. The choice is yours. So that's as much info as I have on Garrett Spencer. I got to talk to him in the DMs on Instagram. We are, of course, in the same field of podcasting as a hobby. But let's talk about some of these things that he said on the podcast while he was interviewing Ty Cam. Now, what I get from Garrett is that he is a sociable person. It seems like, now I can be reading him wrong. Of course, these are all my opinions, but it seems like he likes to be out. Many people do. That wouldn't make him uncommon at all. But seems like a social person. After all, he hosts a podcast with someone else and has guests on. So a social person, you know, has fun and so on and so forth, and just likes to be out, thrives on new adventures and things like that. So when it comes to the actual song of Resilience, those personality traits really come into play. So on the podcast, he says things like this. He calls himself a talentless slug. Now, he said this in jest, but I'm going to have to politely tell him to watch his mouth, because you are far from talentless. And we'll get into that a little more, because you are far from talentless. Excuse me. It's a very, I would think, difficult thing to get into music so late in the game. I don't know how old he is. He looks like he's in his 20s. But you have to have a certain level of wit to do what he did with this song. And we'll get into that a little later. So what I learned about Garrett from this episode was that he pushed himself to make this song with a computer keyboard. A computer keyboard. Not one of them piano keyboards. A computer keyboard with the letters A, S, D, and whatever, you know, whatever other keys are on the keyboard. Just a few keys on a regular keyboard that he made this song with. So it was fully produced by him. And let's just call Ty Cam the executive producer, because he communicated to me that this song, he consulted Ty Cam a lot with a lot of musical questions. Moving on, I'm not sure if he has a history in singing, but what I got from this song is that he's someone who knows how to carry a tune. His voice is not unpleasant. He has a deep voice, and it really complements the actual music production. So if you listen to this podcast, the Unnamed podcast featuring Ty Cam, he talks about how he has a bad habit of starting projects or starting new hobbies, but doesn't follow through on them. So he wanted to force himself to make this song to see if he can really do it, to see if this is something that he's going to really do and get into, or if it's just a flash in a pan, a fluke, something like that. And he prevailed. He made this song, and now he has a keyboard, like one of them piano keyboards. I don't know what, I don't know the name of it and all that stuff. But congratulations, you have a keyboard. And I want to talk about the actual song now, because there was a lot of frustration put into it, and this is from the podcast. He said there was a lot of frustration. He spends a lot of time making this music, and when I call it the song of 2020, we'll find out about that in the lyrics and see if you can relate to this. Now, these are the lyrics of Resilience. Very short lyrics. It's not a long song, so let's talk about it. He says, "My mind is full of dreams, things that cannot be. Here I lie all day, just trying to keep the monsters away. Once upon a time, I felt so alive, but now I feel alone, trapped inside my home. But I have learned to cope, just holding on to hope. That's easier said than done, right?" He says, "Hold on tight. It will be all right." And he finishes the song with the definition of resilience. It's the ability to recover from misfortune or adjust to change. A resilient person can not only endure a new circumstance, but also look at a seeming obstacle and see opportunity in it. Hold on tight. It will be all right. Now, from a musical aspect, there's echoes. It's a down tempo. That's the classification. When you go on Apple Music, it'll say it's down tempo. Now, I never heard down tempo music before, but listening to this song, I'm like, okay, it's literally down tempo. It's a dark song. It's a grim song. It's a dark song. I would call it a dark song, but it's not a negative song. I see somebody pouring out their emotions. For someone to be in a mental space which transferred into a creative space to do something they've never done before, I think that's very interesting, and that's one of the things that's one of the reasons why I wanted to cover this. And I also hope that this serves as some encouragement to Garrett Spencer that you are not a talentless slug, that you should keep making music. This is his first, like when I say this is his first song, this is his first song. This is facts. I went straight to the source. And it's so impressive to me that for someone to make their first song and this is the outcome, you just got to keep going. You got to keep going. Because I'm not trying to set the bar too high, but now you have someone like me who wants to listen. I sent this song to a musician who is also my friend, and that musician enjoyed it. He said his singing voice sounds like Nicholas Jar. And if you never heard Nicholas Jar, he is an amazing producer, for one. I never heard Nicholas Jar sing, so I don't know his voice. But to even be mentioned in the same sentence with Nicholas Jar is a high compliment. I gotta say it. It is a compliment. If you don't know who Nicholas Jar is, the last name, spell Nicholas and then Jar, look at me, J-A-A-R. That's how you spell it. And he also has an alias. I think his alias is Against All Odds. Amazing producer and musician. Check him out. But to be mentioned with Nicholas Jar is a very respectable thing and a great compliment. Now, in summary of this song, and when I read those lyrics off, I wonder if anyone out there was able to relate or connect to those lyrics. My summary is that Garrett has a gift. Because I think this song speaks for many of the people who dealt with loneliness at this year. And maybe loneliness in general. I call it the song of 2020 because these are common feelings that people go through. Who's felt lonely this year? Who's felt alone? Who felt depressed? Who just felt down and out? You turn on the television and you keep hearing about bad things, sickness, death. These things can get us down, right? Right. He has the ability to capture the thoughts of someone who is now out of their element and struggles to adjust to change. The song is overall dark, but Garrett has a deep voice which complements the down tempo of this song. Loneliness and possible feelings of depression may cause thinking that is out of the ordinary. This may be the cause of the monsters that the artist is trying to keep away from. If you remember those lyrics, he's trying to keep the monsters away. Here he lies all day. What once was is now gone. The feeling of being out and social in a public capacity has ceased to exist. He said earlier that he used to feel alive and something like that. He said, I once felt alive. I'm sorry, I'm not reading the lyrics again. But that feeling that he had, that thing that made him thrive, that made him feel alive, in a sense, it's no more. Once again, he's adapting to change. But then we have those lyrics that he tries to cope, holding on to hope. We have the hope that everything is going to be all right. We have the hope that things will get better. And they will, as we all know. We know. But then you hear the chilling words of the deep voice of Garrett Spencer. It's easier said than done, right? I agree. You know, everything's pretty simple when you say it. I'm sure we've all been in one of those situations where you have an idea and then the execution is a little different. Or you set out to do a task and you're like, oh, all I got to do is this, and that. 3 steps. But then in the first step, it's 1 step, right? In 1 step of 3 steps of accomplishing something, right, that you thought was pretty simple. With step 1, there's 1A, 1B, 1C, 1, and there's a bunch of steps to 1 step, and you're like, oh man, this is way harder than I thought. This is easier said than done. Yeah, you can say I'm going to accomplish this today, but actually accomplishing it is a different story. I think most people have been there before. I think that's something common too. But he's still holding on to that. He's still holding on to hope. He still has hope. Just like many of us do. We all have hope that things are going to get better. Try to think of things from a positive viewpoint. There's echoes in this song. Once again, I'm still not too versed in talking about the actual sounds that I hear, but there's echoes. Even though the lyrics were short, the song is about 3 minutes long, I believe. It's about 3 minutes long. And he mentioned in his podcast, the Unnamed Podcast, check it out on Spotify, Apple Music. They even have some episodes on YouTube, by the way. Support that. Their episodes aren't that long either. I be having hour-long episodes, and I know ain't nobody listening to no hour of me. So 20, 25 minutes, you can listen to that, and it's entertaining. I wasn't bored listening to it. FYI. So you think of things from a positive standpoint, and he gave the definition of a resilient person. So I guess the question for today is, will you be resilient? That's a question for myself. Will I be resilient? Can you see your way out of this? Can you look at a seeming obstacle and see an opportunity in it? And before we wrap this thing up, as I sip some kahlua. Before we wrap this up, he talked about how much time music takes. And I think that's a great thing. I see someone who took something that may have been viewed as negative, and something that is a negative to many people, and made the best out of it. So you can't go out as much. So you can't socialize as much. At least not in person. Out of respect and the safety of others. So you start a new hobby. And I say you're pretty good at it. And the time making music can fill the void of, the time of going out and, going to the amusement park. People still go to amusement parks. He's in the Ohio area. They have like Cedar Point. And they have some other place. I've been there before with some big loop. I think that was called Cedar Point. I think Ohio has Six Flags. Does Ohio have a Six Flags? I don't know. Who cares? But the time that you spend, he was talking about how he would just work on this music for hours. And, that's great. Like, I know people who work on music, hobbies, painting, drawing, just as a release. And if that can take your mind off some of the sad things that you feel or felt, and it's not hurting anybody, you keep it in balance. Keep up the great work. We get reassurance from the artist himself at the end of this song, showing that there's a positive out of this dark song. He says, hold on tight. It will be all right. And when you listen to the song, oh yeah, by the way, if you didn't listen to the song and you've gotten this deep into the podcast, what are you doing? Like, seriously, the song is 3 minutes long. I'm looking at my recorder here. Like, we're going on 23 minutes. You might want to check your priorities if you listen to 23, 24 minutes of my annoying voice and didn't listen to the song that we're talking about. I mean, what? I mean, hello. So we have the reassurance that things will be okay. And I looked at that reassurance in the song, and I feel like he's talking to himself in this song. The hold on tight, it will be all right. But it serves as a reminder to everything that, things will be okay in whatever situation is going on. I heard a nice talk one time, and the brother was talking about airplanes and turbulence. How you're on an airplane and you may get a little scared that the airplane is shaking. There's a lot of turbulence. But the thing is that airplanes are made to handle turbulence. And when you think about that, you may be shaking and on a bumpy ride up in the air. But when you remember that the vehicle that you are flying on is made for this, you have a little bit more reassurance that things will be okay. So it may be a bumpy ride now, but it won't always be a bumpy ride. Sooner or later, we may be smooth sailing. This is the Cool Hand Podcast. Cool Hand Podcast, something you got to deal with. Easy. Cut. All right. The pod track gave me an error.